based on the state's destruction of evidence. I'm not clear when we recessed it. I got the impression that the defense was treating this as a motion to just suppress because they were sort of talking about the state going first. What are we doing? How are we proceeding?
Yes, that was my understanding that the state would call these witnesses from the emails and the communications before the break.
And that's not a problem, Your Honor. We're prepared to call them.
Okay, all right.
All right, so would you like us to proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
All right.
And I assume for the purpose of this, I'm not going to have any objections to the exhibits that are part of the court record, and you don't have to lay the foundation or anything like that. They're all going to just be subsumed within the court record. I assume that's fine with all sides.
That the state doesn't have any objection to that, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So the state will call Alexander Hancock.
I'm present.
Will you raise your right hand? You swear affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you'll give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. So please speak up.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Thank you. Good afternoon, Corporal Hancock. Would you please introduce yourself to the court?
Yeah, my name is Alexandria Hancock. I am a corporal with the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been with the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office?
A little over 6.5 years now.
And currently, what are your duties?
I am currently a corporal assigned to the Graveyard Division Patrol.
And on October 21st, 2021, what were your duties with the Sheriff's Department?
On October 21st, 2021, I was a detective. I was assigned to the Violent Crimes Division in our criminal investigations.
Corporal, would you mind? I don't know if everybody else is having the same problems. I'm having a little bit of a problem hearing you. I'm not sure if you can adjust your volume or your mic.
You're somewhat muffled.
I can try to do it on a phone instead. I'm on my laptop now, so I can try to switch a device.
If you could just speak up and maybe turn the volume up, that would.
I don't have a way to turn it up. I'm on a laptop.
Would you like her to change, Your Honor, or just proceed with this?
If everybody can hear. All right.
All right. So on October 21st, 2021, were you assigned to be the case detective involving the shooting of Helena Hutchins?
I was not originally assigned as the primary detective, but eventually I did take it over, yes.
Was that shortly after the shooting on October 21st?
About a couple of weeks after.
Tell me where this incident occurred.
It occurred at the Bonanza Creek Ranch in Santa Fe County.
And were you one of the responding officers to the scene on October 21st?
Yeah, responding detective.
When law enforcement officers arrived on scene, was the firearm that was used to shoot Ms. Hutchins seized as evidence?
Yes, it was.
I'm going to show you what's been marked and admitted by stipulation as State's Exhibit 1.
I'm sorry. Just give me a second. I need to present that. I apologize. That came up faster than I thought it would. I'm just having a technical difficulty. I thought I ironed all these out last night. Stand by.
Well, let me proceed while you pull that exhibit up. Corporal Hancock, when you and other detectives arrived on scene, who did you understand was involved in this incident?
The, main parties that were involved, I was told that the shooter or the handler of the firearm was Alec Baldwin, and then the armorer for Rust was Hannah Gutierrez.
And do you know, or what is your understanding about where the firearm was seized by law enforcement?
My understanding was that it was handed to Lieutenant Benavidez from Hannah.
And what did Lieutenant Benavidez do with the firearm once he took it into his custody?
He secured it in his patrol unit.
And I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, go ahead. I'm going to show you what's been marked and previously admitted by stipulation as State's Exhibit 1.
Oh, wait. Now it managed to go away. I had it right there.
For what it's worth, this is obviously not a major point of contention from the defense, the photograph. So, Erlinda, if you wanted to proceed, we're not going to make an issue of this photograph.
Thank you, counsel.
There we go. Hang on, it's coming.
All right.
Okay.
Do you
Thank
recognize this Exhibit 1?
Yes, I do.
And what is it?
That is the firearm that Baldwin had used on Rust and the same one that was handed to Lieutenant Benavidez.
If we can go back to Exhibit 1, does Exhibit 1 depict the condition that revolver was in when law enforcement seized it?
Yes.
And when law enforcement seized it, was there anything about the condition of this firearm that led you or other law enforcement officers to believe that it may be malfunctioning?
No,
Was there anything that was apparent to you upon looking and examining this firearm when law enforcement seized it on October 21st that it was modified or broken in any way?
no,
And you testified earlier that you understood that the person who was handling and utilizing this firearm when Ms. Hutchins was shot was Mr. Baldwin.
yes, that's correct.
And as part of your investigation, Corporal Hancock, did you interview a number of witnesses?
Yes, I did.
Did any of these witnesses indicate to you or other law enforcement officers that this firearm had been malfunctioning either on October 21st or on the days leading up to October 21st?
No,
Did you also review statements provided by an individual by the name of Alessandro Pieta?
yes.
And who is Mr. Pieta?
He is the manufacturer of this firearm.
And did Mr. Pieta provide information about his particular work as it relates to this firearm?
Yes.
What did he say?
Essentially that this gun is not modified and it is shipped as they produce it to the seller, or to the buyer, I'm sorry.
Did he indicate to the defense and the prosecution whether or not he was involved in the actual manufacture of this particular gun?
I don't recall.
Have you reviewed the transcript of the pretrial interview that was provided by Mr. Pieta?
Yes,
And do you have that in front of you?
I do.
And would reviewing that transcript refresh your memory with regard to what he said about his involvement in the manufacture of this firearm?
Yes,
If you could just take a minute and look at the transcript that was provided to you. And on page 41, if you can review that and let us know when your memories refreshes to what he said about the manufacturer.
okay, I'm refreshed.
Okay. What did Mr. Pieta tell the parties about his involvement in the manufacture of this particular firearm?
He had stated that he was the one that configured that firearm.
Did he also indicate whether or not when this firearm left Pieta Firearms, it was working perfectly fine and as intended?
Yes,
You can take down Exhibit 1, Ms. Morrissey, thank you. Did you also review statements, or let me ask you about other statements Mr. Pieta made. Did he indicate who the firearm was sold to by Pieta Firearms?
he had advised that it was sold to Seth Kenny, but that they used their, I guess, distributor or company EMF.
Did you obtain information about whether or not EMF modified this firearm in any way when they received it?
No, it was not modified.
Now, you just testified that the firearm was eventually sold to Seth Kenny. Did you, during the course of your investigation and review of the different witness interviews, learn who sold the firearm to Seth Kenny?
Yes,
And who was that?
his name was Justin Neal.
And who does Mr. Neal work for?
I believe he's a contractor, but he EMF is his client, and he essentially oversees all the sales of EMF.
So to your knowledge and based on your investigation, can you describe for the court up to this point the origins of this firearm up until it goes to Mr. Kenny?
Yes. So my understanding is that it went from Pieta in Italy to EMF, which I believe is located in California. I believe it's Los Angeles. And from there came to Seth Kenny.
Did you also review information or statements provided by Seth Kenny about what he did with this firearm once he acquired it from EMF?
Yes.
And did he indicate, meaning Mr. Kenny, whether or not he had modified the firearm in any way?
Any modifications, just the putting back in the firing pin.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 6. And for the record, it's been admitted by stipulation as well. Do you recognize that email?
Yes, I do.
And who is that from?
That is from Seth Kenny.
And does he discuss what he did with this firearm once he obtained it from EMF?
Yes, he does.
And what did he state about what he did with the firearm?
Let's see, sorry, give me just a second. So the removal, reinstallation of the original firing pin and retaining pin is not, in my opinion, a modification. Plus, the FBI tested and found it was functioning properly.
So Corporal Hancock, did you also interview Mr. Kenny about whether or not he had modified this gun?
Yes, I did.
And what did he tell you?
He stated that he did not modify it in any way.
What, based on your investigation, what did Mr. Kenny do with this firearm once he acquired it?
After he acquired this firearm, he had another individual working on the set of arrest who was in Sarah Zachary is her name, had her go to PDQ Arm and Prop in Albuquerque and pick up this firearm and essentially retain possession of the firearm until it went to the set of arrest.
And to your knowledge, approximately when did this occur?
I believe it was just a couple days before they started filming.
Was that in 2021?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And do you know how long Miss Zachary had this firearm in her possession?
I believe it was overnight until they could cure it on the set.
And then who, based on your investigation, who did Miss Zachary then transfer the firearm to?
To Hannah Gutierrez.
Did you also interview the defendant in this case, Alexander Baldwin, after the shooting on October 21st, 2021?
Yes, I did.
And at any point, did Mr. Baldwin tell you that this revolver had been malfunctioning or not working properly?
No, he didn't say anything like that.
Did you also review a statement that Mr. Baldwin provided to OSHA investigators about the revolver and whether or not it was working properly on October 21st, 2021?
Yes, I have.
And what did he say with regard to this revolver?
He had explained to OSHA that there was nothing wrong with the gun. He didn't have any issues with the gun while he was there, and that the only problem with the gun that day was that it was loaded with a live bullet.
Did you also review transcripts of a statement provided by an eyewitness to the shooting? The individual's name is Zach Sneesby.
Yes.
And during his pretrial interview, what did Mr. Sneesby say about his observation of what Mr. Baldwin did with the gun right before Helena Hutchins was shot?
He said that he saw him unholster the weapon with his finger on the trigger. He actually said that every time he was rehearsing that his finger was on the trigger of that firearm.
I think we lost Ms. Johnson. Is Ms. Johnson back on? There she is. Okay, great.
Okay, continue, please.
Technology, I apologize. Corporal Hancock, we were talking about the statements provided by Mr. Sneesby and his observation. Did he also indicate whether or not he saw Mr. Baldwin pull the trigger?
Yes, he did say that he observed Mr. Baldwin unholster the weapon, point it, and then pull the trigger.
As part of your investigation, did you request that the FBI conduct any testing or analysis of this firearm?
Yes.
And why was that?
We wanted to ensure that it was the gun that was used in the shooting, so essentially confirm that, and yeah.
And was there someone from the FBI office in the Santa Fe area that you were dealing with?
Yes.
And who was that?
His name was Special Agent Jose Cortez.
And what was his role?
He acted as a liaison between the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office and then the FBI lab in Quantico with our evidence testing.
What testing did you and your department initially request that the FBI conduct?
For the firearm, it was initially, I believe, DNA testing.
Was there anything else besides DNA testing with regard to the firearm initially?
And functionality of the firearm.
I'm going to show you what's been marked and admitted by stipulation as State's Exhibit 2. While Ms. Morrissey's pulling up that exhibit, let me ask you, who sent the request to the FBI for assistance?
I believe it was the sheriff that ended up drafting the request for assistance on behalf of the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office.
Did the sheriff or anyone at the Sheriff's Department initially request that the FBI conduct a test called the accidental discharge test?
No, that was not in our initial request.
Was an initial request made for any destructive testing to be conducted on this firearm?
No.
We have State's Exhibit number 2 up. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
That is the letter that was drafted from the sheriff requesting assistance from the FBI for evidence testing.
Anywhere in this letter, does the sheriff ask for destructive testing to be done on this firearm?
No, he does not.
In fact, at the time that you and the sheriff's department requested assistance from the FBI to conduct functionality testing and DNA testing on this firearm, were you aware that they could do an accidental discharge test?
No, I wasn't aware of that test initially.
When did you become aware of the test?
I'm not sure the exact date that we had become aware of it, but it was later on in the investigation.
And who brought that possibility or that option to your attention?
It came from the FBI.
And what were you told about this accidental discharge test?
We were made aware that if we proceeded with this test, that it could result in damage to the firearm.
And did you and your department approve this test?
Yes.
And did you request that other testing be done before the final accidental discharge test?
Yes, we had discussed that with the FBI, that all of the other testing would be completed before we moved on to the accidental discharge.
Did you request that the FBI photograph and examine and preserve the condition that the gun was in before they did the accidental discharge test?
I don't think that's something that we specifically requested. I think that, however, they process is how they probably have their own policies and procedures on that.
What was your understanding with regard to what the FBI was going to do before they did the accidental discharge test, as it relates to documenting the condition of the gun before they got to that last test?
So I believe that was part of the functionality test, was that we wanted to ensure that the gun was operating properly prior to them doing that accidental discharge testing.
Do you recall approximately when this testing was done by the FBI?
I don't recall the exact date.
From October 21st, 2021, up until the point that the FBI suggested this accidental discharge test, had you been asked by Mr. Baldwin or his attorneys to conduct independent testing on this revolver?
No, we didn't have any other requests.
Were you notified, or anybody in law enforcement, to your knowledge, notified by either Mr. Baldwin or his attorneys that the gun may have been malfunctioning prior to October 21st, 2021?
No.
When you interviewed Mr. Baldwin on October 21st, 2021, did he tell you that he did not pull the trigger?
I don't believe he stated one way or the other in regards to pulling the trigger.
Did he use any terminology when he was describing what happened right before the shooting or when the shooting occurred?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Did he explain to you how the shooting occurred?
I think the statement that he made was that the gun just went bang, or just went off. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact words, but something to that extent.
Did you interpret Mr. Baldwin's statement that the gun went off to mean that the gun was modified or altered in any way?
No.
Did you interpret that to mean that he did not pull the trigger?
No.
During your investigation, did you have any indication from either Mr. Baldwin, any witnesses, or his counsel that this gun had possibly malfunctioned?
No.
In examining or in looking at the gun when it came into your custody, did you have any indication to believe that there were any mechanical defects with this gun?
No.
Did you have any indication that the gun could have or previously had fired without a pull of the trigger?
No.
Why did you approve the accidental discharge test?
We had decided to proceed with that test due to Mr. Baldwin. He conducted an interview, a public interview, and I believe it was I don't remember the gentleman's name. But during that interview, he had made a statement that he didn't pull the trigger on that firearm, which is why we proceeded with that test.
What was your goal in requesting that test?
So the goal of the accidental discharge testing was to see if, in fact, the gun would fire or discharge without a pull of the trigger.
Did you approve the accidental discharge test so that the revolver would be damaged?
No.
May I have a moment, Your Honor, to confer with counsel? I think I'm ready to pass the witness. But if I
Yes.
can- At this time, Your Honor, I have no further questions. I'll pass the witness.
All right, cross
Thank you.
exam.
Yes. Good afternoon, Corporal.
Good
Can
afternoon.
you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. When you first described getting to the scene, you referenced Mr. Baldwin and you said he was either the shooter slash handler of the firearm. Do you remember saying that he was the shooter or handler of the firearm? And the truth of the matter is, at the time of the destructive testing that we're here about, you weren't certain that he pulled the trigger of that firearm, true?
That is what I was told that he had pulled. That he was handling the firearm.
No, that's not exactly my question. My question is, at
I,
the time
I
that
missed that answer. I missed that answer.
you want to repeat the answer? Sorry, Corporal. It was a little hard to hear it for me too.
Yeah. So my knowledge was that he was handling the firearm.
Right. Simply that he was handling the firearm. You were not certain at the time of the destructive testing that he had pulled the trigger of the firearm, correct?
That is correct.
And in fact, at that time, it was quite possible in your mind that the gun had just gone off and that he hadn't pulled the trigger, true?
That was the theory that we were testing, yes.
Now, you talk about the moment that the gun was recovered, and you sort of traced from that moment of the firearm all the way through the different phases that the firearm went through, the hands it touched, whatnot. You recall that part of your testimony?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go back to the very beginning when you talked about, observing the gun being recovered. You didn't see the gun being recovered, did you, Corporal?
I wasn't present there, but through lapel video.
Oh, okay.
I missed that
I-
answer. Through the what?
Lapel video, Your Honor.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for the court, Corporal, because when you testified before, and it may have been the way the question was posed to you, but you indicated that you saw the recovery, as I understood it, of the firearm. Did you not?
I was not physically present there.
Okay. And you didn't inspect the firearm when it was recovered either, right?
That's correct.
Right. So when you're telling the court that you first found this firearm, recovered this firearm, and that you saw no modifications, that whole testimony, you didn't actually do that yourself, did you, Corporal?
No, not myself. It was learned through the investigation.
Okay. And that's sort of the same with everything that you said regarding the tracing of the firearm through its different phases here. You weren't in Italy with Mr. Pieta when he says he manufactured this firearm, correct?
Correct.
Right. And it goes from Mr. Pieta in Italy to EMF in California to Mr. Neal. I don't know if anybody knows where Mr. Neal is. Do you know where Mr. Neal has his shop?
I do not know where he resides.
Damn it. So it's to someplace nobody knows. To to Seth Kenny in Arizona, I think, right?
New Mexico.
Was he in Arizona though when he got the firearm?
I'm not sure exactly where he was.
To Sarah Zachary in Albuquerque, right?
Yeah.
Spent the night in Albuquerque, right? The gun?
Yeah.
Sarah Zachary? Yeah. And then it ended up with Hannah Gutierrez Reed on the set of a movie film, right?
Yeah.
And then it was there for any number of days, weeks prior to the incident, right?
Correct.
Right. And you don't have any specific knowledge, frankly, about anything that occurred during any of those various stops with various people in various places around the world, do you?
I'm not present, but that's, it's part of our investigation is that we learn that.
Well, certain people told you certain things, Corporal. You don't really know what happened with that gun in those various places at those various times, do you?
That's correct.
Had you submitted a firearm for testing in a homicide prior to this case?
Yes, I have.
In the homicide that you were a lead detective on, that prior to this case, okay, was that a homicide that involved a firearm?
I have been involved in a couple homicide investigations involving firearms.
As I understand it, prior to the investigation that brings us here today, there was only one homicide prior to this that you were the lead detective on that led to an arrest. Is that accurate?
That's incorrect.
Okay. How many were there? I apologize if I have that wrong.
There was at least two that I was involved in that I can think of off the top of my head where the individual used a firearm.
Yeah, sorry if my question was clear. I'm asking when you were lead detective, when you were in charge of the case file.
At least two.
At least two. And what two were those?
So, I mean, what specifics are you looking for? I don't.
What cases were those? What were the names of those cases?
So one I had up in the Sanai area, and I don't recall the name of the suspect in that case because he is deceased. And then the other one that I had was a case here closer to Santa Fe, and the last name of that case was Grabe.
And the circumstances, just in one sentence, of that case?
It's ongoing.
Pardon?
It's still active.
No, right, but just the circumstances. Were the parties known to each other? Was it a gang shooting? Just a sentence about what that case was. Just
Yeah,
one.
they were all known to each other, yes.
Was it domestic?
One of them was.
The second one you're talking about where the defendant is not deceased?
I wouldn't say it was a domestic matter. It was more infidelity matters.
But the parties were known to each other.
Yes, sir.
It was not an accidental shooting.
Correct.
In this case, why did the gun get submitted to the FBI as opposed to state police, DPSO? Can you just explain that to me?
At the time of this case, we had just explored options with the different labs. Our lab at that time had a pretty extensive backlog in evidence testing, so we were just exploring options to see if we could find somewhere where we could get results a bit faster.
And what was the priority involved in this matter?
Because it was a high-profile case.
At the beginning of a week or so into this, as you're beginning to send things off for testing, and I see that your name is on the testing paper, or the DA's office, the prosecutors were already involved in this matter, right?
That's correct.
They were involved in deciding what evidence to process and what follow-up interviews to do, correct?
Yes, they were.
You were meeting with the DA, then you'd meet with the FBI and your technician, Marissa Popple, correct?
Yes,
You met with the FBI virtually and in person, right?
that's correct.
And nobody limited your resources at that time in terms of what you could or could not test, fair?
Yes.
So I want to now fast forward to April 2022 and sort of give the court a snapshot of where the investigation was at that point. I think I heard you say that, Mr. Baldwin never asked to test the gun. Did you say that? Did I hear that correctly?
Correct.
Okay, but Mr. Baldwin did volunteer multiple times to you to come back in and to answer any questions that you had, correct?
Correct.
And in those text messages with Mr. Baldwin, you never told Mr. Baldwin that you were going to submit the gun for destructive testing, correct?
Correct.
And the prosecutors were in touch with Mr. Baldwin's counsel, and they never told Mr. Baldwin's counsel that they were intending to present this gun for destructive testing, did they?
I wouldn't know the conversations between prosecutors and the defense.
They never told, I apologize. They never told you that they, don't worry about the fact that the gun is destroyed. We told Mr. Baldwin's counsel, so they had every opportunity to view it, right? They never told you that, did they?
That was not relayed to me.
Okay. And so in April of 22, at that point, you have not conclusively determined how the live ammunition got on set, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you turned back to the gun in April of 2022 to do this further testing, correct?
I don't know the actual date, but if that's what it states, then.
And at that point, as we talked about it, as the examination opened, there were sort of two possibilities. One is that Mr. Baldwin pulled the trigger and discharged the weapon. And the other one is the possibility that the gun went off and you were attempting to use your words, disprove Mr. Baldwin's statement that the gun had just gone off. True?
I think I needed to further elaborate on what I had meant by that.
So we needed to figure out how to disprove that theory or that statement. And that was the way that was proposed to us and what the FBI could do. Fair?
Right. Like I said, I think that what I had said there was probably not a full statement or explanation in what we were trying to do.
Well, that's the statement that you gave.
I understand that that's the statement
Okay.
that I gave. However, I needed, if, I had given time to further elaborate, or if I was able to further elaborate, then what would have been explained was that we were testing the theory due to the statement he made that he did not pull the trigger.
That's fine, Corporal. And I don't, I'm just going to break that down a little bit, though, just so that the court understands, right? That's what you said under oath, true?
Right.
Okay. And Miss Morrissey was the one asking you questions. She didn't cut you off or anything, did she, Corporal?
No.
Okay. And that was the statement you gave under oath at a trial where a person was facing homicide charges and ended up going to prison, true?
Yes.
Okay, this wasn't some casual conversation. You were testifying under oath in front of a jury in the very courtroom you'll be testifying in this manner, correct?
Yes.
Now, you talk about this statement that Mr. Baldwin made on national television where he denies pulling the trigger. You talked about that, right?
Yes.
Okay. What I've always wanted to understand is if he made that statement in December, okay, of 2021, why did you wait until April of 2022 to order the destructive testing?
I don't know when it was actually ordered or when that conversation came about.
I want you to assume for the sake of this, okay, that the interview, which was broadcast all over national television, in which he adamantly denied ever pulling the trigger, right, happens in December of 2021 and is a matter of record, okay? I want you to assume for a second that the order for destructive testing is April 2022, okay? Can you explain to me why all of a sudden in April of 2022 there was urgency or need to order the destructive testing?
Again, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that, though, where the FBI was in their testing. When we found out that this test could be performed, I don't think it's as simple as he made the statement in December and then in April it was ordered. There's a lot of factors that go into that. It was an evolving investigation still at that time. I can't even recall the day that we were made aware that that test was possible.
Okay, well, we're going to pull up that email in a minute, but rather than talking in hypotheticals, can you give this court any information about why the delay actually occurred? Right? You said, well, they could have been backed up on testing, or we could have not known about the testing. When did you, lead agent on this case, begin to explore the possibility of the destructive testing? How long after the very public interview that Mr. Baldwin did?
I would have to know when that option was presented that could be done.
And I think I understand your answer. So what you're telling me is until somebody gave you the option of a destructive test, you did not seek out that option. Is that am I understanding you correctly?
I did not know that option existed.
Okay. And as we talked about before, you had supervisors working with you, Sergeant Zook, Lieutenant Martinez, right?
I do believe that they were the supervisors at that time.
Right. And you had the DA's office working with you, right?
Correct.
And you had their investigators working with you?
Yeah.
Right. You weren't the only one that came up with ideas and things that could progress this investigation, Corporal Hancock, right? You guys were making group decisions and talking about possibilities to further this investigation. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Now, you say at the moment that he denies this, that he ever pulled the trigger, which is this December national broadcast statement. Have you reviewed that statement?
I have, yes.
And you reviewed it when it happened, right?
As he was giving it?
In the days and weeks that followed. You reviewed it contemporaneously, right?
Yes.
You've reviewed it many times, fair?
Several, yes.
And you would agree with me that he adamantly denies pulling the trigger, fair?
Yes, he does.
And you knew, and I'm going to go back to before the accidental discharge. You know, when you were being directed by the prosecutors, some of the information you were providing to the court is stuff that you've learned in the past weeks, right? It wasn't all information that you knew at the time of the destructive testing, fair?
That's fair.
Right. So at the time of the destructive testing, you said, and in sum and substance, that there was no body and no information about a potential gun malfunction that was available to you, right?
Right.
Okay. But Mr. Baldwin had said that he didn't pull the trigger, right?
His interview, yes.
He had never told you yourself, Corporal, in sum and substance, that he didn't pull the trigger, that he didn't volitionally fire that gun?
In my interview with him, he didn't state either way. So.
You knew there had been accidental discharges on the set, true?
Yeah.
You knew that those had included accidental discharges with revolvers, correct?
Yeah.
You knew that Seth Kenney provided those weapons and confirmed to you that there were accidental discharges with those weapons, right?
I'm not sure if he's the one that confirmed it, but through interviewing the people that were around at the time, they confirmed it.
And in your mind, as you've already testified, there was a possibility that the gun had just gone off, right?
And that's why we tested the theory.
Right. But in terms of this concept of whether or not there could have been a malfunction, and this is your word, the word malfunction. Mr. Adiago had told you that from his vantage point, the gun had just gone off, right?
I don't know his specific wording.
Duran Curtin had told you the gun had just gone off, right?
I don't recall interviewing either of those two people. So,
well, when you were talking to the prosecutor, you used information that not only you yourself learned, but that you had learned during the course of the investigation, Corporal. Don't you know that the witnesses the night of the shooting pretty much uniformly said that the gun just went off?
that's potentially, but their statement was that they told me that. They did not tell me that.
So let me withdraw the you that, okay? Again, that's when you were testifying on direct and you were saying how you recovered the weapon, there didn't seem to be an issue, but that's fine. You understand from reviewing police paperwork that the witnesses that were interviewed the night of the 21st, okay, indicated that the gun just went off, true?
If that's what they said, I don't know their exact statement.
Okay. Are you aware as you sit here whether any of the witnesses the night of said verbatim the gun just went off?
That's kind of in the
Your Honor, I'm going to
common.
object. It's been asked and answered, and counsel's getting argumentative with the witness.
She appears to be able to answer this. Let her answer and then we'll move on.
You are aware that witnesses that night indicated to members of law enforcement that the gun just went off, true? It was a common phrase used, correct?
Right.
Was what?
A
A common phrase used.
Oh, common phrase.
And Hannah Gutierrez Reed had told you that if you touch the trigger, it'll just send the hammer down. She told you that, right?
Yes. That's what else.
She had also told you that she had trouble loading a firearm on the day of the incident, right?
Yes, she did state that.
And people had told you or law enforcement that the firearm had a quote unquote hair trigger, true?
I'm sorry, a what?
Hair trigger.
I don't know if that was the phrase used, but that's what they said.
And that it was a sensitive gun, quote unquote.
I don't recall that phrase either.
You knew that the gun was an important piece of evidence, true?
Yeah.
And in deciding whether or not to go forward with the test, who was involved in making that decision?
I don't have specific names, but again, it was discussed with members from the sheriff's office, our evidence team, the FBI, and the district attorney's office.
And who ultimately made the call?
Again, it was a group or a collective effort in proceeding with it.
Did you do any research into the ramifications of this testing?
I was made aware that the test could damage the firearm.
Did you look into other options?
No.
Did you confer with any experts, you or the prosecutors?
No.
Anything else at this point that you did to answer this question in your mind of whether or not to move forward with this test?
I'm sorry, can you state the question again?
Sure. At this time, when you decide to go forward with this test, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you did to help answer the question in your mind of whether or not to go forward with this test?
No, because that was presented to us. So that's the option that was discussed.
Did you provide the FBI with any of the actual real life circumstances of how this incident occurred?
What do you mean by real life circumstances?
Well, you know that the FBI tested the gun by smashing it with a mallet, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I presume you did not tell the FBI that's what occurred in this case, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and you didn't tell them that the gun went off by being dropped either, did you?
Correct.
Okay, but did you describe to them the circumstances of how it actually went off?
I didn't know the circumstances of how it went off. That's why we were testing functionality and then potential for accidental discharge.
You didn't know 6 months into the investigation, any of the surrounding circumstances that might have informed the FBI's testing?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Well, you had the ability to communicate with the FBI, right?
Correct.
There was nobody put a restriction on your ability to share information, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And they were deciding what test or tests to perform on this firearm. You understood that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm asking you at that point, did you explain in any way, shape, or form the circumstances surrounding either the pulling of the firearm and what happened, the motion that Mr. Baldwin did, or any of the circumstances that led to the incident? Did you describe any of those to the FBI?
There was actually very limited information given to them at when we had first started using the FBI for evidence testing. They weren't given all details of the investigation because it was still being learned.
Well, at this point in the investigation, you had a case file, right?
Yeah,
Okay. And in your case file, you had the SFSO reports from the night of 10/21, true?
I don't know exactly when they were done. They took quite a while to produce reports from this.
You don't know whether within 6 months the reports from the night of were done? You don't know that as you're sitting here, Corporal?
I'm sure that some of them were done, but the case was still under investigation at that time.
I agree with you that the case was under investigation at that time, but I'm asking you, the reports from 10/21, the night of, those were already in your case file as of April 2022, 6 months later. Fair?
I would think so, but
Okay.
there were a lot of people working there.
If we could pull up what's going to be defense one, which is the exhibit that I want to talk to you about next, which is the email chain, as we're getting it up, between the FBI and Mr. Ziegler, who tested the gun, and of course you and Ms. Popple. And if we could blow up that top page, you see it's April 21st, 6 months after the incident, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the email indicates from Mr. Cortez, who was your liaison at the FBI, right?
Yes,
I spoke with Detective Hancock. That's you, right?
correct.
Okay. And you would like to request the below, and we can go down, right? And it indicates, I think on direct examination, that you said that the test could, was the word you used, could result in damage to the firearm, right?
Yes,
Okay. But if you look down at this third paragraph here, it says, second sentence, we're tracking that this will alter the firearm and it will not longer be in the same physical condition that it was seized in. Do you see that?
yes,
And this is an accurate representation, I have no doubt, of what the FBI understood at the time. True?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
This is an accurate reflection of what you understood at the time, right?
well, the statement here is that it will alter the firearm and not be in the same physical condition. It doesn't state in here that it will be damaged.
Okay. But you do agree with me that you understood prior to the testing that it will alter the firearm and it will not longer be in the same physical condition. You did understand that, right?
Right, as it states here.
Okay. You're copied on this email, of course, right?
Yes,
And it says enhanced test fire to verify if the firearm functions without pressing the trigger. Is that a fair assessment of what you were trying to accomplish?
yes,
Okay. And at this point, you end up authorizing, you and the team end up authorizing the destructive testing. True?
accidental discharge, not destructive.
Okay. The testing that ended up being destructive. You want to call it the accidental discharge test? That's fine. You ordered the accidental discharge test. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. You do not ask the FBI to disassemble the firearm and to take pictures of it, do you?
That's, again, I don't know their processes on how they run their testing. So I don't believe it was specifically requested from us.
You did not ask the FBI to videotape the testing, right?
I don't believe that was in their request.
Okay. You didn't tell them we need to notify defense counsel of the target, right?
Correct.
You didn't go to a judge or anything like that, right?
No,
Okay. You didn't tell them to come back to you as the testing progressed and to check back in with you, did you?
no,
You didn't tell them to preserve what they were doing in any way, shape, or form, did you?
no,
And you understood, or you understand as you're sitting here now, that the test did alter the firearm, right?
yes,
It did make it so that it's no longer in the same physical condition, right?
yes.
And no one will ever be able to bring it back to the condition that it was in when it was recovered, right?
Objection, calls for speculation.
If you know.
I'm not a firearms expert, so I don't think I can testify to that.
How were you informed that the firearm had been destroyed or broken? If you want the word broke, if you don't like the word destroyed, broken.
I believe through their report, through the FBI's report.
That you eventually received.
Yes.
Nobody called you afterwards and said, just so you know, the firearm in this case is destroyed.
I don't recall ever receiving notice.
And you, as the case agent, never made any other request to the FBI for any further testing of this firearm, true? I have nothing further for this witness at this time.
You direct.
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Corporal Hancock, on October 21st, 2021, did you believe that that gun had fired without a pull of the trigger?
I didn't know at the time.
Did you have any indication or any reason to believe that that gun on October 21st had fired without a pull of the trigger?
No.
Did you have any indication that the gun was malfunctioning on October 21st, 2021?
No.
Have you watched Lieutenant Benavidez's lapel camera video or dash camera video as well?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And is it on that video where you watched him taking custody of this particular revolver?
Yes.
Does Lieutenant Benavidez do anything with the gun after he takes custody of the gun, other than put it in his vehicle?
Objection if she knows.
If you know.
I'm sorry, can you state the question again?
Based on your observation, well, let me ask you this way. Based on your observation of the lapel video and the dash camera video from Lieutenant Benavidez, did you see him do anything with this gun other than take it from where he seized it and put it in his vehicle?
That was all that I observed.
Now, Mr. Spiro asked you questions about communication Mr. Baldwin was having with you after October 21st, 2021 via text message. In any of those text messages, did Mr. Baldwin tell you that gun may have been broken or may have been modified or altered in any way because it fired by itself?
No, I don't recall him ever making that kind of statement.
And at the time that this accidental discharge test was authorized, was Mr. Baldwin charged with a crime?
No.
And is it your practice as a law enforcement officer to tell the defense what investigative steps you are taking in an investigation before
No.
they're charged with a crime?
No.
Now, you were asked questions about your statement that you made when you testified in Ms. Gutierrez's trial, that you were trying to disprove the theory, that theory or that statement, I believe is the words that were used. What did you mean by that?
So essentially what I had meant was that there, was statement that the trigger was not pulled when that gun discharged. And to, check the facts of the validity of that statement, we did need to test that theory.
Now, you were asked questions about the December 1st, 2021 televised interview that Mr. Baldwin gave to one of the networks. And do you recall the date of Mr. Baldwin's interview with the OSHA investigators?
I don't recall the date of it.
Would reviewing the transcript of his OSHA interview refresh your memory as to the date of Mr. Baldwin's OSHA interview?
Yes, ma'am.
If you would please, and let us know when your memory is refreshed.
I'm refreshed.
When did Mr. Baldwin give an interview to the OSHA investigators?
He gave the interview on December 8th, 2021.
And was that after the ABC interview or the network interview Mr. Baldwin gave that Mr. Spiro asked you about of December 1st?
That is after.
What exactly, if you could please testify and tell the court, what exactly did Mr. Baldwin, 7 days after his interview, where he disavowed pulling the trigger, what did he tell OSHA investigators about this particular firearm?
He had told the investigator that nothing was wrong with the gun, and that the only thing that was wrong with the gun was that there was a live bullet in it. He said he hadn't had any issues with that weapon.
Are those his words verbatim?
It's not verbatim.
Would reading the transcript at page 42 refresh your memory as to exactly what Mr. Baldwin told OSHA investigators?
Yes.
If you would, please.
Okay.
What exactly did he say when he was asked about if the gun had any mechanical defects?
He said that it didn't. He said the problem didn't have to do with the gun, it had to do with the bullet. And that he said that there was no mechanical defects of the gun.
Now, you were asked by Mr. Spiro about two other accidental discharges that had occurred on set. To your knowledge, excuse me, based on your investigation, were either one of those with the gun Mr. Baldwin used?
To my knowledge, no, they were not.
Did you understand the phrase went off to mean Mr. Baldwin did not pull the trigger?
No.
Did you? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just interpret that as the gun discharged.
Did you understand the phrase went off, that the gun malfunctioned?
No.
You offered any other options by the FBI after they did their functionality test and other testing? You were offered the accidental discharge test, is that right?
That's correct.
Were you offered any other tests by the FBI?
That is all that I can remember them offering.
Now, was it your understanding you were asked questions about an email from, I believe, Agent Cortez? Did you understand that the accidental discharge test would definitively break that firearm, or that it might just possibly break it?
That it would possibly break the firearm.
Your Honor, at this time, I have no further questions. Thank you, Corporal.
I have very brief follow-up, Your Honor.
Any objection?
Your Honor, they had cross-examination. I would object. We have 2 hours for this hearing that the court has allotted. We have 2 other witnesses waiting to testify.
All right, no, okay. This witness is excused.